Heather Colley is a PhD student in English literature at the University of Oxford. Her short fiction has won awards including the Oxford Review of Books Short Fiction Prize, the Hopwood Award, the BNU-Oxford Short Fiction Prize, runner-up, and the Desperate Literature Prize shortlist. She holds a master's degree in literature from St. Andrews University and a bachelor's degree in the same subject from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. She lives in Oxford, England, and New York. The Gilded Butterfly Effect is Heather's debut novel. Heather, welcome. Thank you for joining us here in the corner booth.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to meet you both and to chat a little bit about writing.
Yeah, when I saw your book title, I was really intrigued because, the Gilded Butterfly, I just saw the cover art, and of course, the Gilded Butterfly Effect. The Gilded Butterfly is very large, and Effect is really small in typeface, and I almost missed it. And then when I read a review, and I'm like, oh, yeah. So tell us a little bit about where the inspiration came for your debut novel, The Gilded Butterfly Effect.
Yeah, sure. So the title comes from King Lear. It comes from a quote towards the very end of the play. And the full quote is something like, "We will all laugh at gilded butterflies." And I've loved that quote since I read it. And I feel like it represents the characters in the book really well. It's a book about campus life and about two girls, Stella and Penny, who kind of get entwined in one another's lives and in the Greek life, so fraternities and sororities at their university, and they both kind of have downward spirals as a result.
I've seen it referred to as Mean Girls on uppers. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I think it's it's darker, and I think it's for a probably slightly older audience. It's college rather than high school, and they don't have the omnipresent like adults that you have in Mean Girls. It's sort of just them causing chaos on their own. So I think it's a bit darker, but I would say, yeah, that's a good description.
I'm always fascinated by people who can just pull Shakespearean references to title things. I think half the titles of Star Trek episodes are Shakespeare quotes. And I'm just like,
oh, really?
I'm just not that smart. Well done. We've talked to folks about, promoting their books, and it can be very daunting to have someone take a look at your book and say, it is this category, it is that category, it is this category or that category. We had an author on in our last season, our last chapter, who wrote something that was categorized as dark romance. Mm-hmm. And when I opened your book, I got to the fancy legal page, with the copyright and all the rights reserved, and saw that it was categorized feminist, women, and friendship.
Yeah.
What is that process like for you when other people take apart your book and say, it's going to be this is how we're going to market it?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I am really involved in the book talk and the bookstagram world. I don't know if you're like on those corners of the internet, but that's, I think, book marketing to the extreme. I think I had been aware of how books are often packaged and, in my opinion, often reduced to these certain like taglines or phrases or buzzwords. One term that we're using a lot in my book is dark academia. And I think that that's accurate in the general sense of the phrase, but it's also a bit of a reductive description, I think, for a lot of books that fall under that category, but it signifies something on social media to readers. So you have to kind of lean into it. And it's important to kind of just be aware that your book may well be reduced into these categories that it's not necessarily, that don't wholly represent it. Like my book has friendships, but the friendships break down, right? It's not like a heartwarming friendship book. But if people are attracted to the idea of female friendships, then that tagline might work. So I think in a lot of ways, it's just leading into like the book marketing world at the moment. People are really into buzzwords and tags, and that's what works.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're looking at marketing the book as a commodity, being able to express what it is very succinctly to a potential purchaser has a lot of value. And so, yes, it's reductive when you talk about its literary merit or its, thematic potential, But yeah, it puts it in a pocket that people go, that's for me or that's not for me. And they can make that decision pretty quickly. Book Talk, I really would love your perspective on that. As an older person, I'm not skilled at sort of mining that. And I understand that it drives a lot of sales and can really create almost a groundswell for unknown works that sort of get elevated by certain content developers. Tell us a little bit about that experience and how it works.
Yeah, it's a huge part of the publishing world in general now, and it's really exploded in the last 4 or 5 years. And there are whole genres that have kind of exploded because of Book Talk, and a lot of those are genre fiction. So like romantasy is really big on there. Romance in general is really big. Things like dark romance. There's some corners of Book Talk and Bookstagram that are focused on literary fiction, which is also really interesting. But it means that this use of signifying phrases and buzzwords has, I think, become almost a forefront of book marketing. Like there's lists that are built off the phrase dark academia. There's whole posts that are built off of the aesthetic. And so it's very interesting. And I think it can be very, very useful if you have the patience to navigate it. And I think you have to be willing to just set aside any cynicism and think this is what book marketing is now, and like I'll give it a shot.
Is there a gender lean, not bias, but lean? Does Book Talk lean mostly female? Because I haven't done any research on that, but it seems like a lot of the buzzwords that you're mentioning are things that would be super attractive to female readers. Is that true?
I think it's dominated almost wholly by women readers. Okay. I have my analytics. I have like about 70,000 followers across Instagram and TikTok. So I get some pretty interesting analytics on who's consuming my content. And I think it's like 90% women. And I also do like literary stuff and literature and humanities stuff that has to do with my PhD as well, which I also think women are more likely to enroll in those kinds of programs. But it heavily leans women, and you see that in the genres and the writers that are pushed on there as well.
The Gilded Butterfly Effect is out with 3 Rooms Press. Do they work hand in hand with you on this, or did you? I'm imagining you started having a book talk, you started your TikTok and social media before perhaps even knowing 3 Rooms Press existed. But do they have a hand in helping you with it, or is it pretty much all yours? Is there a sort of 60-40? Is it 70-30? Talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I started both the Book Talk and the Bookstagram probably 5 years ago now. Well before I think I'd even heard from 3 Rooms about the book. There's some collaboration that you can do with your press. Like you can obviously share and promote back and forth content. But I think for Book Talk and Bookstagram in particular, it's very much about the personality behind the content. And I think that's why people follow certain creators. And people, I think, prefer not to follow. Not that 3 Rooms Press is a corporation, far from it, but people prefer to follow individuals and to hear from those individuals for whatever attracted them to the creator in the first place. So it's quite independent, and it's just a really helpful tool that's kind of increased as my book has been published.
I do some acting on the side, and
Right.
I do know that there tends to be a trend where regional theaters are always hurting for a little bit of money, and having someone that has a big following can be a very attractive thing to those folks, especially if they have a presence in the social media world that can help draw people to buy tickets for the shows.
Right.
Do you feel that when you cultivated your social media audience, was that something that you used as leverage in trying to query the book or getting the book published? Or do you, not to take away from the merit of the book at all.
Yeah.
I'm sure you understand. I'm not trying to say that, but
No, of course.
it's part of the whole thing now, you know?
It is. It can be really helpful. And yeah, it can be really attractive. If you have a following, then that can be a built-in amount of buys of the book, which can be really important. When I was querying and pitching the book, I didn't have quite as many followers. I've had probably like half as many as I do now. So I think my following was a lot less significant. So I did include it. I did include it in the kind of bio part of the query, a little bit about me. But now if I were to do it again, I would probably lead with something like that. I would probably lead with the book and then also say I do content creation in the bookish world. So I might point to it more heavily now because it is really important. And I do think it can swing things one way or the other.
There are folks out there and there are authors, and sometimes, there's the old stereotype that authors like to be sort of solitary and they like to keep to themselves and not the most extrovert people. Can you give us a little bit of insight on how much time you spend, perhaps like a week, doing social media? And is it pretty much just, you've done it so much, it's just kind of habit now? Can you just to kind of let folks that might be wondering, well, how do I even get started, give a little bit of insight on that for them?
I have always been very attracted to writing, I think because I'm an introvert. So the social media thing does not come or didn't come naturally to me at first. But I also am the sort of person that like, if it will help, like I'll give it a shot. So that was my thinking. I do my posts. It sort of depends on what sort of thing you're doing. If you're going for a certain aesthetic or more informational or purely for marketing. But mainly my content is based on sort of education around English literature, which is my PhD topic, and also literary fiction and my book. So I do lists, I do thematic kind of explorations, and I do them every day. So I do post every day on both Book Talk and Bookstagram. Unfortunately, the algorithms do reward like content. The more you post, the more your stuff will get pushed. And I would say the important parts are like keeping your narrative. Like, what are you trying to say? What are you trying to teach or express or share? How do you want that to look? And I think the sooner you can figure that out, the earlier people know what to expect from you. And then that's how you kind of get people to watch.
Did your online activity drive the content of your book, or was that separate and then you sort of tried to figure out a marketing strategy once it was done?
The TikTok and the Bookstagram I started kind of after I wrote the book, a few years after I wrote the book. But having been on those parts of the internet, it did help to know how I would position the book. So I knew right away that dark academia is really big right now. It's one of these words that people see it and they'll think, I just really want to read that. I don't have to know anything else about it. I love that vibe. So I knew that would be a really useful phrase. Like, I don't know if you've heard the more recent one. It's like the weird girl fiction.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's really big as well. That's having a big moment. And I knew that my book could slot into that. So I think just being present, even if you don't post, if you just kind of are present and you're looking at what people are saying and how they're categorizing books, it can be really helpful just in framing how you're going to pitch your book as well.
So is this a one-time thing? I mean, you sort of check that off the bucket list, you're done, written novel, now I'm going to go get a PhD and then move on with life? Or are you going to do another one and pursue writing as a discipline?
Well, I have a short story collection coming out in February of next year, and I'm drafting my second novel now. So I'm just about to finish the first draft of that. So yeah, I would love to publish more if anyone will publish my books.
Okay. So can we talk about time management? Because dear God, all right.
Yeah.
you have a lot of competing priorities.
Yeah.
Clearly you're able to manage multiple projects at the same time. Give us insight into how you manage this activity and maintain success.
I don't think that there's a clear answer. I think a lot of it is just every day is a new day and every day is trying to fit in all of the different moving pieces. My PhD, now that I'm coming to the end of it, has to take priority. So like over the last year while I was doing edits for the novel and while it was coming out, that took priority. And now I'm back to my thesis. If I get really busy with the thesis, I won't do social media for a few days. I think it's just about prioritizing what needs to be prioritized. I am lucky in that they're all of these things are very much related. Like if I'm doing an Instagram post about a certain topic of literature, it'll be something that I'm thinking about already for my work. So it's not a total departure. It's all sort of things that I'm thinking about just in different forms in a lot of ways. I don't know if you've heard of Novel November, but I am doing that this month, and I found that to be really, really useful for forcing myself to write.
Yeah, putting external deadlines on it just to get yourself motivated, kicking the pants kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about your workspace. Tell us about your workflow. How does it come to you? Is it the rigorous thing, or does the vibe hit you? The lightning bolt hits you, and then you take it from there, or something else?
I'm not someone that kind of has a particular workspace. I'll work wherever is most comfortable. Like, that's not really important to me so much as whatever idea I'm working on. The one thing that's always stayed the same for all of my short stories and my longer form work is that I always have an ending in mind, or I often write the ending almost first. And I don't know why. That's just always felt really natural to me. I find it a lot easier if I have the last scene written. I find it a lot easier to basically be building up to something. So that's one thing that I do just to keep myself on track. But other than that, I'm not really a plotter. I don't write down the plot. I have an idea of what I want to say, but I just try to get as many words down as possible. And then I go back and kind of design the plot with what I have.
If you're going for a PhD, is there any sort of relief in being like, oh, I'm going to take a break and work on my novel, or vice versa?
I don't know if relief is the word, because they both have their own like stresses, but it's very different. I think that they use two completely different parts of the brain. Like the PhD, when you're writing for a chapter or something, you're almost always deferring to someone else. Like, you're putting your own argument in, but a PhD is so infused with the work of everyone else that came before you. So like every sentence will have some kind of reference. So you don't have to be quite as original. You have to have an original through line, but the creative writing is just totally different, because it's like, just whatever you want, you don't have to defer to anyone. You don't have to make an argument. So it's one of them, the PhD, is very logical, and the other one is just really not.
I'm fascinated with voice, and you seem to have a confidence in your prose. Do you feel like you've got it? Are you still working on it? Tell us about that. When did you start writing? That's probably a good way to get into it.
Yeah, I'm also really fascinated by voice. I think it's probably the most important thing in writing and in reading. I started writing in high school. That's when I started writing kind of like self-aware fiction. And I have always been attracted to writers with really idiosyncratic voices. So someone who, if you pick up the book, you don't have to know the title or the author, but you know who's written it. So that's always been something that I try to emulate. I think that's really the mark of a great piece of work. I think sometimes I feel very much in the flow with voice, and sometimes I feel that I've lost it. I don't know if you both kind of struggle with that, but sometimes really feel in it, and sometimes I just don't have it. And that's, I think, where like edits and revisions become really important.
Yeah, that's actually where I wanted to go next with it, because it is really easy to spot when that voice is off track. After you've written it, you come back and go, what is this? Yeah. We talk a lot about the writing process of drafting and editing and proofing and whatnot. And it sounds like in the editing process, you're coming back on your own, seeing some of those things that you'd like to change and then changing them. Do you also work with other readers, people who you trust to give you feedback? Do you work with a professional editor? So tell us a little bit about that editing cycle for you.
I've never worked with a professional editor. I will say, for the Gilded Butterfly Effect, that I wrote that in undergrad, and I wrote some of it as part of a thesis. So I had my thesis advisor read sort of some chapters of that very, very early on. And so I think that was really helpful, because I was very young and had never written a novel before, and having external encouragement and direction was really, really useful. I think now that I'm more confident, like I've done it already, I don't know that I would turn to a professional editor, but I will say my dad is always my first reader of everything. Him and I have very similar literary tastes, and he will also tell me if something's not very good. So he has always been kind of one of my main early readers.
Does he have a background in literature? Is he a professor?
No, he is in communications and marketing, but he is British, and so he grew up reading a lot of kind of 80s and 90s British literature, which is what I love as well. Like, I'm a huge Martin Amis fan. So I think we just kind of we're drawn to similar sort of to books and writers, and he does get my voice, I think, very much.
Yeah. And that's really important for anyone who's reading your work, to not try to twist what you're doing into what they want it to be, and so that's luxurious. And also, as far as like mass communications or trying to influence people through the written word, I could see a lot of symbiosis there. So that's really good that you have someone. Kind of want to turn it over to you a bit. Is there something that you've been dying to talk to random strangers about?
I am really excited about the stories that I have coming out next year. One of the stories follows Stella, who's one of the two main narrators in the novel. But you won't have to have read the novel in order to kind of understand the story. It can stand alone as well. But those stories are all kind of interconnected. And I was a teacher for a little while in a high school, and they're all set in a school, and they're all interconnected. So I'm really excited about those because I love short stories. I find them really fun and enjoyable to write. So that's out with another indie press next year. And then I'm really excited for my work in progress. I think it also leans into like the weird girl thing, to use an Instagram buzzword. But I'm hoping to finish drafting that up this year and seeing what happens.
Outstanding. Hey, are those stories published before you anthologize them, or are you kind of collecting some published and some unpublished? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, some have been published. One or two. One was in the Oxford Review of Books a few years ago, and another was in the Desperate Literature Prize anthology a year or two ago. So a few have been published, and then I think there's 10. And so the rest, I wrote 2 new ones for the collection, and then the rest I just reworked for the collection.
Are you working with the same publisher, or are you going to be shopping this one around?
So this is coming out with Serving House Books, which is a different indie press. They're based out of North Carolina. So I signed the deal for the short stories, like right when I signed the deal with Three Rooms Press. So I didn't even really think about like working with the city. It didn't even really like come up because I was still talking about the novel with Three Rooms Press. So it sort of just came about that there were different publishers. But I am excited to see what happens with the book. I'm going to shop it around and see what happens. And I'm not looking forward to getting back into querying, but I'll have to do it.
Yeah, and that is the next question I had for you. It was really the business side of this. I'm really curious about, obviously, you have a ruthless time management as far as the work that you're doing to create art and to pursue your academic discipline. But there's also this other hidden work that has to be done in order to ask people to pretty please put your work out in the world. Tell us about the business side of it, how you've approached it, what our listeners might get, as a kind of a pattern of success that you've noticed.
Yeah, I think one thing that I probably would have liked to hear a few years ago is that I wrote this book when I was like 19 or 20, and I'm like 27 now. So this is the most annoying advice, and I hate when people give me this advice, but I do think patience matters. If you're confident in your story and in your book, and you think that it kind of has a place in the world, I do think its time will come, but it might be a while. That's just how the industry works, especially for literary fiction. I've had like agents in the past. I've had it die on submission with those agents. And then I went the small press route, and it finally materialized. So I think just remembering there's a lot of different avenues in publishing, and your book can have multiple chances. And the debut, I think, will take time, and that is okay. The time will pass anyway.
Along those lines, having written the book when you were 19 and now having it published, I'm sorry, was it published? It was published this year, correct?
Yeah, just in October.
what is it like to have something that's been around for that long? Have you ever kind of gone back to it in the process and been like, you know what? I think chapter 13 could actually be, I mean, when do you say enough is enough? This is going to go out. However it goes out, that's it.
It's hard. There's definitely been, I mean, the book it's probably had 25 different versions since that original kind of draft. But there's moments where I've gone back and been like, oh my God, that's so horrible. Obviously I wrote that at 19. That's awful. And it has to be changed. And that's one thing that's nice about the time that has passed since I wrote it. I think I've become a better writer, and I can be more critical of the work because more time has passed. So I think it's become much better. You do have to say at some point it's done. It's just done, or I'm done with it. Some editor will have an opinion on it, but I'm done with it and I've done what I can.
That's a really great attitude. I'm just only speaking from my own experience. Having had a piece that you wrote when you were younger and then having it come out now, I know that I would sort of be like, I'm worried that people will think that this is how my writing is now. And that's, we all get a little bit older. We all have different perspectives. You've had all of these years to have different influences come and excite you. And it must be, it's so fascinating. Congratulations on being able to be like, this is finished. I'm happy with this. This is going out, because I don't think I could wait that long. I think I would be very much like, I don't know. Maybe it's not perfect. And
yeah, I think that is the trouble with writing something young and then getting it actually released several years later. But I also think the book is about young people, and it helps that it was written when I was young. And I think that I was probably speaking to young people much more than I was speaking to people that are my age now when I wrote it. There's like technical things and voice things that need changing because I was so young, obviously, and like just wasn't very good. But I think sometimes it's like good to, I think about writers that have had decades long careers, and I like so many of their books from their debuts to their last books. And you can see a lot of the differences, but they all have merits.
Well, and you look at some of the great authors, throughout history. You've got like one of my favorites is F. Scott Fitzgerald, and his first novel was The Side of Paradise, and that book is not nearly as good as The Great Gatsby, right? And it's perfectly fine. It was actually a hit, for him, but that's almost encouraging your best work is ahead of you. So, and that's a wonderful way to think about it. So congrats to you for really having that kind of courage to say, this is good enough. Let's move forward. And it is, I mean, having read the book, it's a really good book. I think the reviews that I've read of it kind of underplay the comic element of it. Do you find that as well, that it really is darkly comic and folks aren't quite punching that up as much online?
Thank you. I mean, I think if you're the sort of person that likes that type of comedy, which I am, you'll see it, but I don't think it's for everyone. Some people will think like, I didn't think this was funny at all. I thought this was super bleak. And obviously that's where I see the humor, and that's where the humor comes from in the book. But I think it's a particular type of dark comedy, and I love when people see it and when they appreciate it. But I'm also aware that, like everything in fiction, like it's not for everyone.
Yeah, well, part of that is the environment, right? 8 years ago is a lot different from today as far as just the way the world is, and sort of, when So anyway,
I don't want to sanitize my writing based on, the way that the world has changed and the way that people read. I think a lot of the best writing is transgressive and kind of pushes back against expectations and linguistic norms and so on. So part of what I like to do is like kind of shock and be bleak and be dark and be earnest in the writing. So I try to keep that in.
I mean, it really calls into question, what is the purpose of literature at that stage? And, studying literature as you have and as you are doing, and to be able to contribute to that body must be really satisfying for you.
It is. And the book is so very much related to so many books and so many writers, like even from the Shakespearean title. But everything that I write is very much informed by my studies, by my reading. So that is a really kind of satisfying thing, getting to reference people that I just so admire in my own work.
Yeah. Who are some of your literary heroes, folks that you really model or take after?
Yeah, so sort of like we mentioned before, I have always been really drawn to voice. So certain people that come to mind are Vonnegut, A. Martin Amis, Toni Morrison. More contemporary writers, I really like Ainsley Hogarth right now, and Holly Butler, I think, have amazing voices. I also study a lot of the modernists, so I do like a lot of Woolf, Eliot, Ford Madox Ford, things like that. And so I take a lot from them. But I also am very into Shakespeare, and the novel that I'm working on now, I think, leans a lot more into kind of Shakespearean things and Shakespearean endings. But I kind of think about all of that as I'm writing.
That's wonderful.
It must be so great to have such, if you're working towards a PhD, I mean, it sort of inherently has you doing the work, you know? I think one of the things for me after I graduated from college was sort of like, well, I don't have a timetable. I'll just get to it when I can.
Yeah.
But you're actively doing so much research, doing so much reading, and doing so much writing just in that realm as part of your everyday workflow. It must feel very, I mean, it's just second nature to you by now.
Yeah, I think the most important thing to writing is reading. That's what I think. And I think because I have to read for my work, even though I actually do poetry, so I don't even really read what I write in terms of fiction, but reading anything, I think, and reading really good stuff as well, that is the most important thing to becoming a better writer. So I'm always thinking when I write about what I've just read or my favorite books or my favorite plays and so on.
The poetry is almost like, you know, if fiction is a strong cup of coffee, poetry is espresso, right? As far as voice goes. So
Yeah.
When I was doing my MFA, I was reading a lot as a result of that degree, and I was far more productive than I am now. You know, I really am almost sort of sheepish about how little I'm reading in the near future, because most of the stuff I do, I'm a training manager for a conveyor belt company, and so a lot of what I do is technical writing and technical reading, which does kind of pull, you know, the strength and the focus. So yeah, I kind of miss the old MFA days where they're like, hey, pick 20 novels. Like, oh, great, that's awesome. I can't wait to go read. Yeah.
And when you're reading that much, you can't help but just have these voices in your head and these terms and these tools, and it just becomes so much more natural.
Are there any literary magazines that you kind of ascribe to that you're reading now to discover new works?
Yeah, I have always really liked the Desperate Literature Anthology, which comes out every year, because it's judged by, well, I mean, if you read the 2024 one, I'm in it, but it's just a subtle fact. But besides that, Chaz Moshvek, who I really admire, is one of the judges for the competition. So those stories are just always really good, and they're very short, so they have to be really compact, and I love those stories. I like the London Review of Books and the Paris Review of Books, which I suppose is kind of, they're like the gold standards, but I turn to those a lot.
Having only experienced your novel length work, I haven't seen any of your short stories. Where would they fall in sort of length? Are they flash fiction, or are they more traditional, you know, 2,500 to 5,000 words? Where do they fall?
They are, in the upcoming collection, they're all 2,500 to, I think, 6,000 around. One or two might be a little bit longer. But my sweet spot is like 2,000 to 3,000. I think that's the perfect short story length.
Same.
And with those stories, is that the same as working on a novel? Is your father the sort of first, your sort of first reader, and then from there just kind of going back to the drawing board?
Yeah, he's also, I think, read all of those stories by now. Stories I always treat as, and this is probably why I find them easier, but they're just lower stakes to me, because I mean, they just are, you know, you just don't have as much room to heighten the stakes. So I'm sure I've kind of worked on a few that I've never even shown to anyone, because they're just, in my mind, they're almost sketches of things that might come. But yeah, it's very similar. My dad reads all my stories, and yeah, I get his opinion on a lot of my writing.
So as we pivot now to kind of close out our discussion, I really want to leave our listeners with something actionable that they can take away, because this has been a great conversation about your process, your motivations, you know, your purpose. What would you recommend to complete strangers that you've never met, that they adopt as part of their writing process or their writing purpose to really accelerate their work?
I think one thing that has helped me is kind of ignoring all of the noise about writing process, which is so, again, annoying advice. But I think sometimes writing can be so kind of hard to start, especially, and it's we want to procrastinate writing so much. And I think sometimes we overcomplicate the circumstances that we write in. And so I have tried to force myself, like if I get an idea, I'll put it in my notes app. It doesn't, I don't need to be at my desk. I don't need to be somewhere specific. If I overhear something, I'll put it in my phone. If I'm like falling asleep and I think of a certain thought or an idea, I'll put it in my phone. And so I think almost kind of taking the gravity away of the situation and just knowing you can kind of always write, you don't need the perfect circumstances. You can always do it, has helped me a lot because it just removes the stakes a bit.
I think that's really good advice. So Heather, where can people find your work? What's the best way for them to reach out and consume your work?
I am on Instagram and TikTok. So my Instagram is just Heather Colley Author, and my TikTok is PhD with Paige. That's my middle name. And then I'm also just on my website, which is also Heather Colley Author, and I have links to everything there.
And we'll include those in the show notes as well to make it easy for people to find you. Heather, thank you so much for joining us today at the Corner Booth.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to meet you both.